Hello everyone, and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today, we will be talking about the Frog and Molly McGee AU. Yay! So first, some context. There was an episode of Chibiverse that this corner of the internet actually cared about, because it had both Phineas and Ferb and the Owl House. The main issue of this episode was everyone got their best friends mixed up because of Dr. Doofenshmirtz's shenanigans, and Molly McGee happened to think her best friend was Sprig. And one of her lines from this episode was, "The ghost in Molly McGee? What kind of name is that? Now the frog in Molly McGee? That's a show." Then the internet took this line seriously, making fan art of this made-up show, putting characters like Molly, Libby, and Andrea where Anne, Marcy, and Sasha are supposed to be. To my knowledge, though, it never went past that stage of just that fan art, most of which was just the three girls with the calamity powers like the original Calamity Trio had in The Hardest Thing. And on this channel, we have a saying: if no one else is going to do it, you might as well do it yourself. Oh. Okay. First, let's talk about the story before the three girls get sent to Amphibia, before we talk about the events that actually happen in the episodes. Molly and Libby would obviously become childhood besties, however, it might take longer for Andrea to join the group than it took Sasha. Nothing really story important happens until much later. In fact, the whole flashback scene that happened in All In might never happen, since it seems like Daryl would be the most likely person to pull off the prank that happened in that flashback. Maybe Molly helps him, but not very likely. Then the next day comes, which was the day the original Calamity Trio was sent to Amphibia, and the same would go for these three. They would be hanging out at the library when Molly finds the book that had the Calamity box in it, and thinks that Libby would like it. Just then, both Molly and Andrea get texts from their parents, and have to leave Libby at the library. At Molly's house, her parents tell her that they would be moving to a place called Brighton, the place where the actual The Ghost in Molly McGee show takes place. And like Marcy, Molly runs out of the house. Meanwhile, with Andrea, her parents don't want her hanging out with Molly or Libby for the same reason Amity's parents didn't want her to be friends with Willow in the Owl House. The two run into each other and catch each other up on what happened. They both come to the conclusion that if neither of them could hang out with each other anymore, and the fact that Libby struggles with making friends, that if they both leave her, she'd be lonely forever. Then Molly sees the Calamity box through a window and tells Andrea that if the box works, they can go to another world where they never had to drift apart. Andrea likes Molly's imagination, but doesn't believe it can work. Molly convinces Andrea that it would be the only way to save the friendship, and if it doesn't work, at least they can give it to Libby as a parting ways gift. Andrea is convinced, and buys it since she's rich as heck in the actual show, and probably even richer here since this takes place in California. So no need to steal the Calamity box. Libby also conveniently passes by the two walking home, and notices the box from the book Molly had just given her. They all go to the playground. We see Anne, Marcy, and Sasha open the Calamity box for the first time, which these three do as well. Molly is sent to the forest near Wartwood, Andrea is sent to Toad Tower, and Libby is sent to Newtopia. And just like that, the first dominoes of this series have been tipped over, and now chaos shall ensue. Eventually, the episode Anne or Beast comes around, or in this case, Molly or Beast, and it stays relatively the same except while Molly and Sprig are talking. While Anne was hiding the music box, saying that she had no idea how she got to Amphibia, Molly, on the other hand, would not only tell Sprig how they got there, but also show him the box. But that's really the only change of this episode. Best friends may never happen, since Molly isn't the type of person who would disobey a grown-up and leave the house. Instead, she would try Hop Hop's pain peppers along with Sprig. Let's say, after eating multiple of them, though, she realizes Hop Hop fell asleep with his eyes open and ends up taking the key anyway. When they get to the lake and see the sign, Molly wouldn't manipulate Sprig into staying. The reason why is because Anne did it in the original timeline because of Sasha's influence. Yet the closest thing Molly has to that is Andrea. And the worst thing she did in the Ghost and Molly McGee was take credit for the word Amphibia, even though Molly made that word. And Andrea in this timeline has Livy and Molly as friends for a very long time, and has grown much better as a person because of them. Her character development isn't fully done, but she will never reach Sasha season 1 to 2 level. Instead, Molly would just be a petty child who just wants to go into the water, but Sprig drags her back to the house. That night, Molly sneaks back into the river, puts her toe in, and realizes that the night had made the water colder. So she just goes back to the house. Then again, she did stay almost the entire day outside during the episode Ready, Set, Snow, so she might stay in. Even then, without anything to defend her, and she still runs into that snake, she has superhuman energy to get her out of the water fast enough. There was a benefit of going out this late, though. While she was heading back home, she came across a ghost, aka Amphibia's version of Scratch. You see, in this AU, ghosts can pass over into Amphibia and not to Earth because of higher levels of magic, which would also explain why they can pass over in Gravity Falls if you believe in the connected universe theory, because Gravity Falls has anomalous effects that allows ghosts to pass over. The two talk for a while, and Molly makes friends with this version of Scratch, or at the very least acquaintances. Molly promises to visit Scratch whenever she could, and goes back to the house. King Crazy, instead of refusing the food and insulting Hop Hop like Anne did, Molly refuses the food, still eats it because she felt bad, and makes something for herself, making this part of the episode more like Hop Luck than King Crazy. Once Molly makes it, Sprig and Polly want to try it and end up loving it. Hop Hop is hesitant at first, but enjoys it just as much as everyone else. Molly then helps with meals later in the day, and the word gets out about Molly's great food, and despite everyone not really being used to her yet, they still want it, and thus the planters monopolize Molly's food, and it ends up becoming more successful than the veggie stand could ever be in a billion years. Hop Hop is even okay with this, since some of Molly's recipes include his vegetables, so he isn't mad about leaving the past behind or anything like that. I'm trying to think of what could possibly go wrong here, and the only thing I can think about is burnout, which we all know Molly is very, very much immune to. In blood, sweat, and tears, Sprig goes through heck. If Anne was bad sharing a room with, Molly's infinite energy and capability of staying up literally all night would make it a dozen times worse for Sprig. But other than that, the episode goes the same. In Hopluck, because of Molly's cooking in King Crazy, the planters end up winning the potluck with basically no competition. In Stakeout, Molly, like Anne, doesn't like the crummy couch, the weird house design, or anything like that, but doesn't say anything to make Hop Pop happy. Eventually, though, she reaches her snapping point, and Hop Pop tells her about what it was like back in his day, and Molly would understand things could be much, much worse. However, Molly then decides to be Molly and give the entire house a makeover while everyone else was sleeping. And luckily, it isn't enough to make the house sink into the swamp like what happened in New Wartwood. In the Domino Effect, despite Molly not having a pet that looks like Domino too, she's still a sucker for cute animals, which must be hard for her in here of all places. So she goes to save her, and luckily Scratch was right there, and he scares off the bees trying to kill Domino too. From there, the episode goes the same. Molly doesn't have a phone, so taking charge would never happen. In Anne Theft Auto, or in this case Molly Theft Auto, instead of asking to drive like Anne did, Molly might ask for something similar to what Sprig and Polly asked Hop Hop, to which he says no, so this episode never happens. In Breakout Star, though I doubt Molly would happen to get pimples at all, let alone at the exact day Anne did in the original timeline, let's say she does. The episode would go relatively the same. Either that, or Molly would continue to scare me by banging her head against the wall until the pressure makes the pimples pop. Sprig vs. Hop Hop would stay the same, but Molly's chaotic energy would run the farm into the ground much faster. In Girl Time, because of Molly's food, the planters went from poor to the second richest people in town, next to the mayor because, well, it's the mayor. So Molly wouldn't be handing out fake IOUs. She still does the stuff Anne did in this episode, though. And when the time came, she apologized to Polly for trying to change her. So they have Polly beat the spitting record, this time with no stakes, and she does so. Dating season would stay the same until the end, when everyone is trapped in the Love Dove's nest. Since Molly happens to be friends with a ghost, Scratch can free everyone and scare the Love Doves away. In Anne vs. Wild, or in this case, Molly vs. Wild, unlike with Anne, the planters actually invite Molly to go camping with them, since, again, unlike Anne, Molly actually enjoys nature, especially Amphibia nature, so they stay there until the camping trip is over. Heck, they may never meet Soggy Joe. Then Molly shows Hop Pop and Polly the Calamity Box, because she just remembered only Sprig knows about it. In Contagie Anne, or in this case Contagie Molly, Molly would end up helping the planters covering the crops during the storm, even though she doesn't really want to. Because of this, everyone gets sick. However, this also means no one would be able to take care of them, so Molly never makes the soup that Anne would have made, so the planters would just rest until they got better. Sorry for coughing so much. In Family Shrub, there would be a very low chance that Molly would have played that Tetris ripoff like Anne did, so she might not have enough experience to solve the puzzle in the last room, so her, Sprig, and Polly get squished and are never seen again. They're dead. And that's where the episode ends. Wait, no, that's where the series ends. The main characters are dead. The show over. Bye, guys. I'm just kidding. But let's say, despite all odds, she does complete the puzzle, then the episode would basically go the same. Lily Pad Thai might never happen because in this timeline, the planters and Molly basically dominate the entire food supply in Wartwood, and are probably capable of controlling food business in the entire valley if the word got out. and because of how successful they are, many restaurants would go out of business, and I think it's safe to say Stumpy's would be the first to get booted. In Planter's Last Stand, the Planters would have no problem with keeping the stand with the quadrupled rent because, again, Molly's food is pure gold compared to the food amphibians usually eat. The kids would have to just put in some extra work is all. In Toad Attacks, when the Toads show up and try to attack Molly, Molly wouldn't have brought a tennis racket or anything she would have to use as a weapon to these Toads. Though the Toads have the weaponry advantage, Molly has the advantage in speed and energy, which is what ends up saving her skin. And when her head is about to be crushed by a giant hammer, near the end of the episode, she calls up Scratch, who scares the Toads into nearly leaving. But yeah, this episode basically goes the same. Then Prison Break comes around, and though Andrea would never reach Sasha levels like I said earlier, she can get close enough. Even though she isn't as manipulative as Sasha, her social media influence back home would give her at least some experience. She's able to convince Percy and Braddock to help her escape, and we go through an entire episode of the three sneaking past security and escaping Toad Tower. While riding away, though, Grime happens to spot the three. Then we have a nice car chase scene, or in this case, a steed chase scene, which ends with Grime losing track of Andrea. Just then, Bog and the other tax toads run into Grime and tell them about the creature from Wartwood, aka Molly. Grime comes up with the idea to use Molly as a hostage in order to get Andrea back. Then they go back to Toad's Tower. Andrea, who had been listening into their conversation, now knows where Molly is, and that she needs to save her. So she orders Percy and Braddock to head to Wartwood. Grubhog Day goes the same until the Grubhog falls off the roller coaster. Molly decides to be reckless and jump off the ride to get the Grubhog. Unfortunately, Molly doesn't realize the amphibians would be cutting up the cute little Grubhog to raid its guts. Obviously, she's going to intervene by kidnapping it and running away. Even when Sprig doesn't ruin this event, Molly does. Wow, just wow. Molly ends up setting the Grubhog free into the wilderness, and though the townsfolk hate her for doing this, they eventually forgive her. The next day, Andrea finally shows up to Wartwood, and her and Molly have a nice reunion. Andrea tells Molly about the toads and to be prepared for them at any moment. Hop, Pop, and Lock would stay the same, though Andrea could probably show Hop Pop videos on how to dance on her phone, since unlike the other girls she has one, the training is still nothing compared to what Monroe can do. In Civil War, while Anne was being responsible and trying to stop the disagreement about who was the better choice in love choice, Andrea and Molly would join in on the chaos, which Molly picks Hunter and Andrea picks Alistair, meaning it would be up to Hop Pop to get everyone back together. Because of this, the town could be split into two for multiple days, but ultimately it gets resolved. Either that or Andrea would just have no interest in movies like Love Interest, and thus this episode would never happen. But anyways, moving on. In Hop Popular, Hop Pop wouldn't be running for the mayor. At this point in the timeline, the Planters have more money than the mayor, considering what happened in Toad Tax. So Hop Pop becoming mayor would be more of a downgrade. Plus, juggling politics and a food service is going to be pretty hard. Instead, we'd need someone who wasn't a planter, not a child, and has knowledge of Amphibia politics. Of the group, we have two options, Percy and Braddock. Though we would all love to see Percy become the mayor, Braddock is tougher, so she would do better in the trials. And since these guys worked at Toad Tower, they know amphibian politics better than anyone in the valley, and they know that the entire valley got a vote on who became the Wordwood mayor. I also imagine someone being like, where can we possibly find someone who could convince thousands of people to vote for Braddock with as limited reasons as possible? Then Andrea would be like, my time has come. Because of the combined power of uh, Andrea's advertising and Braddock's strength, they make Toadstool look like a tadpole. And with that, Braddock becomes the new mayor of Wordwood. In Croak and Punishment, Molly and Sprig go into town to try to figure out who stole the Blue Moon shell and immediately find Andrea taking selfies with it. Case closed. In Trip to the Archives, Andrea, Percy, and Braddock would come along, and let's say Molly and Andrea aren't too thrilled about studying. Molly would be responsible and study, but the same can't be said for Andrea. She would end up teaming with Sprig, and because of that, when trying to put the lens back on the daylight sensor thing, Andrea wouldn't be as clumsy as Sprig, so she doesn't break it, and everything is solved like that. Eventually, both Andrea and Sprig get straightened out and are ready to actually try and study. In Snow Day, I start to get flashbacks of the last time Molly was outside in the snow all day, but luckily that won't happen since this time she has Andrea to hang out with and isn't socially isolated like the extrovert she is. But still, Polly gets captured and Andrea and Molly save her. Meanwhile, I'm trying to control my shipping urges. Wait, did I just share an opinion about shipping on the internet? Oh god! I'm screwed! I'm screwed! Everyone's gonna come after me. Anyways, cracking Mrs. Croaker would stay the same, and same for a night at the inn. Then in Wally and Anne, or in this case, Wally and Molly, Molly would see the Moss Man like Anne did, but the only phone in the entirety of Amphibia was Andrea's phone. So her, Andrea, and Wally would go to search for the Moss Man. So when Wally bumps into, say, Molly, Andrea would be holding the phone, allowing her to take a picture of the Moss Man, so they could show pictures to everyone, and they wouldn't be considered crazy by them. But as much as I'd like to end to the episode right here, Andrea doesn't want to just take pictures of the Moss Man. She wants to take selfies with the Moss Man. Then the whole sequence of the climbing up a stone wall happens. Molly goes to save Wally while Andrea sneaks up behind the Moss Man and takes a selfie with it. Family fishing trip would stay the same, though it's not very likely Molly and Anne would want to go parasailing on the boat trip. Molly is an agent of chaos, though, so she might. Andrea would also just stay back in Wortwood, so she's not in this episode. Did you expect her to go on a boat? That's not a yacht. In Bizarre Bazaar, Molly might hesitate going to the Bazaar at first, but Andrea would convince her that it's a good idea. Fast forward a bit to when they're about to give the box to Valeriana. Since we have extra eyes this time around, Andrea could actually hand the box to her without it getting stolen. Plus, Andrea wouldn't take her eyes off the box with shiny gems for a moment. Because of this, Valeriana can tell the three about the three temples and the Mother of Olms. Because of this, Molly doesn't end up giving the box to Hop Pop, so he never buries it. Cursed might never happen, since Anne and Sprig only got cursed because they bumped into Barry the Candyman. The only reason they did that is because they figured out how to break Sprig up with Maddie. Since Sprig and Maddie never got engaged in this timeline, Molly and Sprig might never get cursed. However, let's say these children were still reckless idiots and still bumped into Barry the Candyman. Barry plays a happy facade, and though Sprig falls for it, Molly doesn't. She's willing to inhabify Wartwood by any means necessary. Though Barry rejects it at first, he can't resist puppy eyes, so Molly does everything in her power to get some more and ends up being successful somehow. Fiddle me, this might never happen because Hop Hop wouldn't need to give Sprig a better future, at least not this early in life. If he chooses to one day inherit the Molly food business. The Big Bug Ball game would go more like the episode The Unnatural from The Ghost of Molly McGee, where Molly joins the farmer team and Scratch cheats the entire time. Of course, by the end, the farmers make one last point on their own. In close combat, not just Molly, but also Andrea is taken to the quote-unquote daycare. When they get to choose their weapons, Molly picks an axe. Andrea tries to pick a dagger, but Tritonio tells her that is the wrong answer. Throughout the day of training, Tritonio continues to correct everything Andrea does. He does it a few times when Molly makes a mistake, but he's mostly focused on Andrea. Basically the episode goes the same, except instead of Molly, like someone might expect, Andrea gets taught some valuable lessons, and even some sword fighting skills. Children of the Spore would stay the same, and in Anne of the Year, or in this case, Molly of the Year, Molly wouldn't be as harsh as Anne was on everyone to make a good party. The worst thing she would end up doing is spy on everyone to see what they like so they can have a very good time at the party. Andrea, however, has some ideas. She thinks that she could use Molly to make the party that she wants it. When Molly refuses, though, Andrea starts to use some of her manipulation abilities. She convinces Molly that no one would like what she had in... she doesn't know that no one would like what she has in mind because no one has tried it yet. And because of this, lots of people are unhappy at the party, which eventually leads to it catching on fire. Molly ends up saving the day, and while she's arguing with Andrea about manipulating her, Grime finally decides to show up. Great timing. Great timing. In the episode Reunion, Grime takes Andrea back to his wagon, and despite what everyone thinks, Grime doesn't drive away with her. Instead, Grime is trying to stay calm in order to get information out of Andrea on how easily she got the guards to fulfill her every wish. Andrea refuses to talk to him, though. Meanwhile, Molly is planning to save Andrea. The planters took down the guards while Molly went in to save Andrea. Once she's saved, they all start running, but are eventually caught by the guards. They are then sent to Toad Tower as punishment. Not just, wait, hold on, wrong part. They then got tortured for the information for hours on hours. And this caused Andrea to snap. Not just because the pain was unbearable, but because they were about to hurt her best friend, Molly. Before Grime can actually get any information, though, he hears loud war cries outside. He looks out and sees the citizens of Wartwood with torches and pitchforks who had come to stand up to the Toads and get Molly, the planters, and Andrea back. Not only that, but Scratch came as well. There was a massive battle, and even though the frogs won because One-Eyed Wally committed war crimes,